Tommy was a high school jock. He scored more points than anyone else had ever scored at his high school. Tommy was on top of the world until one night when he was arrested for selling drugs. You see, Tommy had become addicted to prescription drugs because of injuries he had received in playing sports. But because of that, Tommy lost his scholarship. He soon dropped out of college, and he was spiraling down into depression. He couldn't maintain good relationships because he couldn't forget about the past. One day, Tommy reached out for help, and in doing so, he found God. He was able to confess his sins, and he found release. He was no longer held prisoner by his past. Like Tommy, many of us are held prisoners by our past. We may have committed serious crimes, spent time in prison, walked out on a marriage, abandoned our children. But no matter what it is, we just can't let it go. But does this have to mean that we are without hope for the rest of our lives? In Isaiah 59:1, it says that the arm of the Lord is not too short that it cannot save, and his ears are not too dull that he cannot hear. In other words, God shouts out with an emphatic no. My grace is sufficient, and it will cover whatever your sins are. But that's not all there is. God's grace is so great and his mercy is so wonderful that he provides you what you need to sustain life. In other words, you can go on and live a good life. Think about what the Apostle Paul said when he said, I forget what's in the past, but I press on towards the goal. It doesn't matter what your sin is. It could be the sin of coveting. It could be lying. It could be cheating, stealing, murder. God's grace will cover your sins. He said, your sins were like scarlet, but they will be as white as snow. No matter how horrible your sin is, how low we sink, God's grace will always be greater. If God has said this, that he has forgiven your sins and he'll remember them no more, then move on. You got to learn to be like the Apostle Paul, forgetting what is in the past, move on towards a future goal. That's why your front windshield is much larger than your rear mirror. And now that you know this liberating fact, or this freedom comes from knowing God, will you help others that are stuck in their past? Will you pay it forward? And this is Jesse Walker with the Glenwood Church of Christ.